Hey everyone, Aaron here. Welcome back to the channel. I got a fun video today. We're going to look at a video where there's an engineer in Germany who's got a YouTube channel called Play with Junk. And he did a video a few years ago breaking down one of Scientology's e-meters. He takes it apart, he looks at all the components, he tells us what these components are and comments on their quality and stuff like that. We're not going to watch the entire thing, but I want to show you the major parts, and maybe I can provide some commentary on what Scientologists think and believe about how this e-meter is put together, what exactly it does, and how they use it. So let's just jump right into it.
Hello my friends, I'm playing with junk again, and today I got this one. While I was on my trip through Germany in vacation, the postman brought me this, which I bought from eBay for about $100 or something.
So he bought it for $100. Scientologists pay $5,000 for an e-meter. And Scientologists who are training to become professional auditors are required to have 2 e-meters. It only costs Scientology about between $200, well, for the Mark 7 it was about $200 to make the e-meters. In 2013 they came out with a new version called the Mark 8 Ultra, and that one probably cost closer to $500. But the fact that he got this thing for like $100 online is hilarious.
It's the Hubbard Professional Mark 7 Super Quantum e-meter, which is used by Scientology to help people to get clear. That's how they call it.
So just a quick comment. So he's doing this video in 2018. The Mark 7 Quantum came out in 1996. The Mark 8 came out in 2013. One of the reasons the Mark 8 was produced, one of the reasons, is that so many of these older version e-meters had made their way into the hands of people who were outside of Scientology. Based on the paperwork that Scientologists have to sign when they buy a Mark 8, it is almost impossible for a Mark 8 to wind up in the hands of someone outside of Scientology. I have had several people offer to send me their Mark 8, but to be honest, the other thing the church has done, Scientology has done, to keep these meters from even being useful to people outside of Scientology is they have a new digital like recertification system where every year you've got to plug your Mark 8 into the internet. You've got to connect it online, and you have to recertify with your Scientology International, your IAS membership number, so your International Association of Scientologists membership number. And if Scientology, through its database, isn't able to verify that you are a Scientologist in good standing, your meter turns into a brick and cannot be used. So all of these old versions of the e-meter can be used by anybody, and you'll see in this breakdown why. They're very basic electronics. But the new Mark 8 meters can't. And I'm mentioning that because by the time he shot this video, the new meter, the Mark 8, had already been out for 5 years, and yet he is using an e-meter that's been out for like 20 years. And that's one of the reasons why.
If you don't know about Scientology, there is a lot of documentation in the internet. There are Wikipedia articles about it. And if you know what Scientology is, then, well, just let me proceed. The manual says if nothing is attached here, you have to turn this down to 2, which is indicated here. That's just a digital indicator for this pointer here. So for people who are not able to read an analog pointer, there is also a digital display, 2.00. The needle should be at set. That's what the trim button does. Okay, we are ready.
So that is, if an auditor was setting up for an auditing session, what he just did of putting the tone arm in 2.0 and calibrating the needle with the trim knob so that the needle is right on set is how you would calibrate the meter in the beginning of an auditing session, with the exception of the fact that the sensitivity knob is supposed to be set at 32, and he doesn't have it at 32. If he were to move it to 32 right now, the needle would move off of the set line. For the purposes of the video he's doing, none of this matters.
To measure. This display here, no, let me start with this, is just a normal clock. This indicator here counts the numbers which are gone down. So if you decrease this handle here, this will add how much you decreased, how many numbers you decreased here. If you go up, it doesn't count, but if you go down, it counts again. Up doesn't count, down counts again. This counting of how much down you get here tells the teacher if his student is going well. So the more down you have, the better it is.
Yeah, I mean, he actually got that right. Of course, he's not using the right language, but we wouldn't expect him to. So the way Scientologists think this meter works, and actually the way it physically works, is just measuring the change in resistance to an electrical flow. When the resistance increases, the needle moves to the left, and you have to move the tone arm to the right to bring the needle back on the dial. When resistance decreases, the needle falls to the right, you have to move the tone arm to the left to bring the needle back on the dial. That is what an e-meter physically measures, and anyone familiar with the physical sciences would explain it that way. The only difference is that Scientologists believe that the reason the resistance to the electrical flow goes up or down is because of the restimulation of mental masses in the mind as a result of the auditing process. That's why the more mental pictures get restimulated, the more resistance there is, the more the needle falls to the left, the more you have to move the tone arm up or to the right. Scientologists believe that through the process of auditing, eventually the pictures and masses that have been restimulated and have created a greater impediment to the electrical flow will then move away or erase. The resistance to the flow then diminishes, the needle falls to the right, you bring the tone arm to the left, and that's why the tone arm moving down is called, that's the action that an auditor is looking for in an auditing session. They call it the tone arm action or TA action. And he is correct. The more downward motion of the tone arm an auditor records during an auditing session, the more mental gain the person receiving the auditing is considered to have experienced in that auditing session. And at the end of each auditing session, the total amount of downward motion of the tone arm is actually recorded for every auditing session. And I think the Mark 6 e-meter was the first e-meter to actually just create a digital readout of the amount of downward action of the tone arm. An auditor used to literally have to manually count it up by periodically, every time you moved the tone arm down, you had to note down where it was before you moved it and where it was after you moved it. It was pretty ridiculous. So he got that right. He nailed it.
So the first problem is, depending on how tight I squeeze these things, and I don't have to variate that much. I can play with that needle as much as I want. But the funny thing is, my hands are getting warm, my skin begins to sweat, and my resistance, well, now it tends to rise.
So I just want to comment on what he just said. He said the cans are getting warmer, his hands are getting warmer, so they're starting to sweat. That should result in decreased resistance, increased conductivity, decreased resistance. It should result in the needle moving to the right and having to move the tone arm down. But in fact, the opposite is happening. I don't claim to know why, and let's see if he says anything about it.
So I have to rise that a little bit. Yeah, that's about what it does. Let's have a look inside. Does it look like a $7,000 device? I don't know. Okay. There's quite a bit of stuff inside. Remove that is. And I think the rest of the circuit is probably still the same. Well, here There is the charger input, charger PCB, a good quality potentiometer here. It's a wire wound, 1, 2, 2.5 turn wire wound pot. These pots alone are worth probably 30 bucks. They are not cheap. Then we have a switch here. Is that the switch? Yes, that's the power switch. The sensitivity switch. Not too cheap things. Then we have potentiometers here. Yes, that is the name of the manufacturer, Spectral. They make high quality pots, and I can tell you, if you move that handle here, it feels very well. Also this one, because it's the same manufacturer of potty. They are not cheap, they are high quality pot makers.
It's interesting that he comments that they are high quality components. When you move the knobs on an e-meter, it doesn't feel cheap. And so, I mean, it's interesting to hear him say, yeah, they're not cheap.
Simply because, well, you use them a lot. You also pay a lot for this device, so. Then we have an MM5452N. This is, what a surprise, a driver for a 7-segment LCD display up to 4.5 digits. So what I'm looking for is a CPU. Maybe it's underneath here. No. Okay, so I removed a couple of screws and I removed that one from its socket. And surprise, surprise, the PCB here says ATC51, which is an old microcontroller chip, which is obviously not available anymore. So they made this replacement board here, microchip PIC 18F2423. That's the tiny chip here. And we have 2 more LCD drivers underneath here. One for the clock and one for the counter. Clock display PCB from 1994. Well, what shall I say? Maybe $5,000 is a little bit too much for this thing. It seems to be a low volume production. It seems to have a lot of handwork here. It has very good components. For example, I like the potentiometers, switches or quality stuff. So the material is not bad, but it certainly is not worth thousands of dollars. Maybe 200, 400, something like that.
Yeah, now he said it's clearly a low volume product. Every single e-meter is put together by hand. Obviously the components are machine made, but they are assembled by hand. They are absolutely low volume. I mean, there's probably no more than 5,000 or 10,000 units of an e-meter of any type. So like there was probably never more than 5,000 or 10,000 Mark 7 e-meters ever produced. You could say the same for the Mark 7 Quantum and for the 8. So definitely low volume. Considering those numbers, you're talking over 5, 10, 20 years. So it sounds like he was saying the components themselves probably aren't worth more than 300. Somebody might say, oh, the price is high because of the hand labor. No. These things are being put together by Sea Org members who work for slave wages. Sea Org members are paid $50 a week. They work, and that's an allowance. That's not even pay. Like, they sometimes get paid zero. Sometimes they get paid nothing. They are considered religious volunteers. They do not actually receive a salary. So, you know, these e-meters are produced for essentially free. Components, $300. The Mark 8 is probably closer to $500. The labor expense is almost literally zero. And yet Scientology is selling these puppies for $5,000 each.
Yeah, they have their secrets. They want to keep their secrets. That's okay. But there's the 713 CPE on the charger. Well, can't find the datasheet right now, but it's a fast charge control chip for nickel cadmium and nickel metal hydride batteries. That's the battery pack. We have 7 batteries, 8.4 volts. So if I replace this battery, the whole unit will be like new, and maybe I will sell it again. Okay, thanks for watching.
Well, there you go. I'm a little surprised he didn't take it apart even more than that. I thought he was going to take apart the needle assembly and do some testing on that. But yeah, so it annoys Scientology to no end that these e-meters have made it into the hands of non-Scientologists, of people who still believe in Scientology but have left the Church of Scientology and practice auditing outside of Scientology. The whole time I was in Scientology, I was actually under the impression that Scientology had successfully prosecuted people for practicing auditing and using the e-meter outside of Scientology because it was a violation of Scientology's trademarks and service marks. That was a lie. Scientology has actually never won a lawsuit against somebody trying to prevent them from applying or using Scientology or auditing or the e-meters outside of Scientology. And that was one of the driving factors behind the Mark 8, was trying to prevent these meters from getting into the hands of people. All right, everyone, that's all I've got for now. I hope that was at least mildly entertaining. Thank you for watching. Thank you to all of you who watch until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye.